Welcome everyone to the governing board meeting of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority here on Friday, February 25th. We'll start with the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Authority Board. I will now call the roll. Please go ahead and unmute yourself for me. All right, Supervisor Joya.
Here.
Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Director Holman.
Here.
Supervisor Gorin. Councilmember Hahn. Councilmember Libya.
Here.
Chair Pine.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ann. So we begin the meeting as always with an opportunity for public comment on matters that are not on the agenda today. Do we have any public comment, Ann?
We do not have any public comment or hands raised right at this time.
Okay, then. So we can proceed to any board announcements that anyone may want to share.
I'll share.
Go ahead, Mr. Joya.
I was going to say, I thought that, I was out at the Pacheco Marsh project out in Martinez with I know, there we go. I have my cup here somewhere, right? There we go. There we go. Out there, whenever it was, a couple of weeks ago, along with staff from Contra Costa Public Works, and did an interview with Doug McConnell to cover that project specifically and tying it into the Restoration Authority's work. And I thought I thought it was really great that he's able to cover. I think he's covering some other projects too, right, Amy? And is going to run it on one of their episodes later in March, I believe. So when that runs, can you let us know? So when you get confirmed what show it will be on, and hopefully it will highlight a number of projects and the good work of the authority and try to link it. My comments were more to link, that type of project into the really good work that's happening Bay Area wide, and what this means on the ground. So we'll see how that comes out.
Yeah, if I recall, Doug McConnell has done a couple of segments on Bay Restoration.
Yeah, it sounds like he has been following the work when I chatted with him, pretty intensely. And he was way more familiar with the work of the authority than I thought he would be, and in some detail. And so I think this was just this project, and I think he went to a project in Alameda as well, was just a really good visual way, right? When levee breach and the wetlands being, forming, I think was just a very good visual way to sort of showcase the work of the authority as opposed to doing it in the abstract. So that I thought, we'll see how it comes out. I'm sure, hopefully it'll be good. I'm sure it will be. He's a great storyteller.
Great, thank you, John. Director Holman, you had a comment?
I do, and thank you. Some of you know probably that I serve on the board of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, and this is the 50th year anniversary of that organization. It's also the 50th anniversary of Environmental Volunteers and the 60th anniversary of Green Foothills. So it was 1972 was a great year for a lot of environmental activism and organization. So in April, there will be one of the events that MidPen is putting on will be an event in Ravenswood Preserve, which is along the bay, East Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And to find out more, you can go to the MidPen website to learn more. But I hope that you all can attend that or some of the other events that MidPen is conducting this year. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, that's a fantastic reserve. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you for participating with the ribbon cutting when it opened.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, I do not have a chair's report today, so I can turn it over to Amy, if you want to pick things up, Amy.
Yes, the executive report, the first item is the continuation of remote meetings. So resolution 89 authorizes remote teleconference meetings for the authority and the advisory committee and the oversight committee for the next month. So that's an action item. And staff recommends that you authorize Resolution 89.
Okay, if we could have a motion. Welcome, Director Hahn. I'll go ahead and move approval of the item.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded. If we could call the roll on that, Ann?
Sure, I will. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn,
I'm going to abstain.
Councilmember Levier,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 6A is approved.
Okay, and then 6B is closely related and also has to do with the legislation related to the making findings every 30 days. So staff is recommending adopting Resolution 90, which revises the authority governing board meeting schedule and adds meetings in March and May. So we can continue to consider the continuation of remote meetings every 30 days. And that is also an action item.
I'll go ahead and move that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Lever.
I'll second.
Second by Director Holman. We could have the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn,
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Yes.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
This motion passes. Agenda number 6A is approved.
Great. And then item 6C is a report on expenditures under the EO's delegated authority. So there's a quarterly report and the expenditures were a couple of minor expenditures for, I believe, CEQA fees, and then an augmentation for the Tiscornia Marsh project with Marin Audubon Society. So if you have any questions on the expenditures, we can respond to those.
No questions?
Yeah. So that concludes the executive officer report, and I'm keeping it brief because I know we've got the grant round 5 discussion, which I'm sure everybody's interested in.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Why don't we go ahead and take the next two items, 7 and 8 together. Number 7 is the approval of the minutes of December 10th. That was a full normal meeting. And number 8 is approval of the minutes of January 26th, which was a very short meeting just to comply with the Special Brown Act requirements during the pandemic. So any revisions or questions about the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second for the 2 sets of minutes. We have the roll call vote.
Yes, I will be doing a roll call for summary minutes December 10th and January 26th. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn,
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Yes.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
These motions passes. Agenda item number 7 and 8 is approved.
Thank you. Item 9 is a consideration and approval of the text of the annual report. We all have a draft of that, which was circulated earlier this week. Taylor, do you want to walk us through the highlights?
Of course. Let me share my screen if I may. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Great. And I will endeavor to be quick. Chair Pine, members of the board, thank you for having me today. I'm here to present an overview of the draft text of the annual report for the fiscal year 2020-2021, which runs July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. So just to remind you of this process and why we're here 7 months after the year end to talk about the report. The year ends in the fall and summer, end of late summer, early fall. I, with an ad hoc subcommittee from the advisory committee, draft the narrative text. And the report is so much better for their input. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to them, to Lisa Horowitz-McCann, Letitia Grenier, Jessica Martini-Lamb, Steve Chappelle, and Adrian Covert, who all gave really, really great feedback throughout this process. In December, the board accepts the audited financial statements. In January, Karen and I put them together and produce this draft for you to review and hopefully approve. Then we make it beautiful and post it and share it widely. So this year's report follows broadly the same outline as previous year's report. We have the overview, the chair's message, 2 features, one on prioritizing equity and community engagement, one on interconnected bay ecosystems, the project map, regional updates rather than project updates, because we have so many projects now, we can't update on all of them, the performance measures, and the financial summary. So Chair Pine, thank you for furnishing the welcome message. I think it's a wonderful statement of optimism and hope. And as you say, the future looks bright for the Bay. So it's a very nice scene setting piece for where we see our work heading. The campaign goals we always report on. These were the campaign goals that were set out in the Measure AA campaign. And for the first time, we have progress in all of the categories. So you'll see we don't have a percentage yet in shellfish habitat acres, but we have an acre. So it's on there. And we have some restored or some submerged aquatic vegetation habitat as well. So the first feature is on prioritizing community engagement and equity. And it's hard to remember, but this is actually, in this fiscal year, we adopted Resolution 70, which formally adopted the recommendations from the advisory committee. We approved the community grants program. We set up and ran the community grants RFP. We awarded the first community grant. And we did, I know Linda Tong reported on this at a previous meeting, but we've set up new relationship building networks. We've created we reviewed our grant materials and program to reduce barriers to access, and we've changed some of the funding mechanisms so grantees can actually get funding in advance rather than arrears, which has happened for the first time in this fiscal year with the Oakland Shoreline Leadership Academy program. The second feature is on interconnected bay ecosystems, because we were so excited about our acre of shellfish habitat and submerged aquatic vegetation. We thought we should really spotlight the way that our funding goes to the different habitat types that comprise the bay shoreline. So this image is actually the cover of last year's report, but it ties in nicely with the subtitle Baylands, Transition Zones, and Upland Habitats. So it really just kind of shines a spotlight on the different projects we have in those areas, and not only the geographic scope of our funding, but also the way that we kind of uniquely can fund all phases of the project, from permitting and design to implementation and monitoring. So the real value of having a regional body that can do that. The project map this year makes it very visually clear which ones were funded in the last fiscal year, which is good because there were 13, which is quite a lot. And our community grant called out in that beautiful teal color in Marin. The regional updates, we made a lot of great progress in the last fiscal year. We had projects that breached, we had projects that broke ground, we had projects that completed. So the regional highlights give a real fly through of the best and brightest of our projects. And then you can see the chart that we always report as well of the geographical funding allocation. Last year, every region in the dark blue had funding, which is always nice to see. And the performance measure table shows us, it tracks along many measures, shows us making progress against them. And just a reminder that this table does not have targets. Targets are really in the campaign goals, just because there are so many different things that we are measuring in the performance measures. And that's, I apologize for cantering through this, but I know we're on a tight timeline. And I just wanted to say before I turn it over to Karen to do the financial reporting, that next year will be the 5th fiscal year. I mean, the year that we're in is the 5th year of grant making, which is a pretty big milestone for a 20-year measure. And my plan is to transition from going from this sort of print format that we've used historically to going to a digital first format for the annual report. I still really love print materials, but I think going digital is the way of the future, clearly. And we can do more links to multimedia stuff. We can link to, you know, the open road segments and things like that. So I think we will continue with this format this year, but then hopefully have something new and exciting to consider next year. So with that, Karen, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Pine and governing board members. I'm going to focus quickly on reviewing just the multi-year tables to give folks a quick overview of the authority's funds. And just to remind folks, the authority divides the funds into an administrative operating budget and a program, a project-based program. So I'll start with administrative operations and then end with the projects, which are the most exciting, obviously. And I'm going to focus just on the final total column to give you an overview. So the authority has collected approximately 1.3 million in investment income and other revenues. They have transferred in 5.1 million, which is 5% of the Measure AA taxes, for a total of 6.4 million available for administrative operations. Below the green line, we have the expenditures. Staffing costs have gone up each year as we ramp up and have more projects. This is starting to level out also since we're starting to close out some projects. And important to note out that FY 2021 is the last year, marks the third and final payment of repaying the ballot costs. So next year we will not have this line on our agenda because we have fully paid back the ballot costs. So that's exciting. The total administrative expenditures is 4.9 million and the ending fund balance is 1.6 million, which will carry over into FY 21-22 for administrative operations. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a multi-year project-based revenues and expenses. Again, we will focus on the last column. The authority had brought in 102.9 million in Measure AA taxes and additional funds for the BRIT. After transferring out the 5%, the RA had 98 million for the project-based program. The green number, the 94.6 million, is the total after we pay the county fees and also the consultant's cost to collect the fees. And that's the amount that's available for projects for the authority through the end of the fiscal year. At the end of the fiscal year, a total of 30.1 million was expended on projects with an ending fund balance of 63.9 million. I want you to remember that 63.9 million figure. We'll circle back to that at the end. Okay, next slide, please. This is the exciting projects table. This is part one of the table. You saw this table last year with the same projects. We just added the FY 2021 to that. And I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide. We have a whole nother table of projects. One reason why this list is so long is that we had 6 board meetings since the summer 2020 meeting was held in July and not June. It entered into this fiscal year. So these are all the new projects that we brought on board in this fiscal year and the expenses that we had. If you focus on the bottom row, you can see the blue column shows a total of 90.4 million that has been awarded to projects through the end of the fiscal year. We have 33.1 million that has been expended, with 59.7 million in the green column as the remaining grant balance at the end of the fiscal year. if you remember, that 63.9 million was our ending fund balance. And you look at the grant balance, you can see there's only about 4.2 million that was unobligated at the end of that fiscal year. And we have awarded projects, several projects since then. So you can see we have awarded the majority of the funds have come in so far, and the projects are underway and implementing. So that's my quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions about the finances on these tables and the other tables that are in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor and Karen, for the overview of the annual report. Do board members have any questions or comments? Let me see. I think it does a nice job of what we're describing, what we're all about. I like the special section describing the different types of habitats that we work on. I think that's a good primer. Glad to see that in there. Director Gorin.
I really wanted to thank everybody for their work on compiling the annual report. And as you were going through it, I was saying, okay, what am I going to report to the Board of Supervisors of Sonoma County and to the community? And I'm hoping that obviously I will send them a link to the report. That goes without saying, but I think it's really important to come up with speaking points to the media about the annual report, and we've accomplished something that is really digestible, easy to understand. Thank you to the voters for approving the funding, and this is what we're doing with it, so that all of the media can pick this up and run with it, with maybe some beautiful photographs of some of the projects that we've funded, and make it easily transferable for the board members and others to post it on Facebook and other social media. Let's advertise how successful we are and how we are caretaking the public funding.
I think Director Weaver had a comment.
Yes, I would also echo what the supervisor just said. This does make a wonderful catalog to get out to the public and to the local office holders and the community about the work of the authority. And it's just so impressive. I was getting a little tingle up my spine looking at how much has been done, and the fact that the money is actually going out and doing the projects. It's just really impressive for the Bay Area. And we're blessed to have constituents that are so wonky that they're going to be pleased that staff got us onto the Eco Atlas. and we do have a lot of folks in our communities who love to dig down to this level. So it's a really wonderful report for us to be able to get out and show people what we can do. So thank you.
Director Joya.
I just want to say I think it's a great report. To me, the best part of it is that the map of the Bay Area showing all the projects. I think that is always really important for the public to see sort of the geographic dispersion of the projects, where they're located. I liked how you also were able to easily show which cycle it was funded in with the little symbols, and the fact that you've listed not just the new projects, but the update on the other projects. I do think every annual report should continue to list not just the newly funded projects, but all the projects, because for many people, this is all they'll see. They'll pick this up, and in one document, they can see all the projects, the status of the project. And I think that's really important. So as we continue to do this, you're sort of we're going to have a longer and longer list of the projects. Right. And I'm sure Sally Lieber looks at that list and said, gee, these are all the kind of things we envisioned when I carried the bill to set up the authority. Right. And so it's nice to look back and to see all of the projects listed there.
take a. Karen, Director Holman, you had a comment?
Just one quick one to add to the praise that's been extolled already. It's just, when you look at reports like this, one of the things I look at is like, how consumable is it? And I think this is very consumable and speaks well for the work that this authority does. So appreciate how it's been put together, and thank you.
Take a moment to see if we have any public comment on this report. I don't see any, Ann.
No, no public comment, sir.
Okay.
And I would just add that from the perspective of a paper pack rat, I had to burn up a house to burn up all my paper. I do appreciate, the your initiative of saying, this needs to be online. We'd love to have a print copy, but we know that so many print copies just sit there not being looked at. So this is interactive and easily accessible. And thank you so much. Important decision going forward.
Okay, unless there's any other comments, we could take a motion to approve the text.
I think Councilmember Hahn.
My apologies.
No worries. Thank you. I just wanted to it's maybe the same thing as same theme as Supervisor Gorin of sort of how does this get disseminated? Because I think it is such an excellent resource. And I'm wondering, do we mail copies, for example, to all elected officials in the, in the jurisdictional area of the authority? I assume we're mailing this to all kinds of sister organizations and like-minded organizations. But do we have a plan to provide some kind of an update to the actual taxpayers, a one-pager, a mailer, I don't know, or is that, I'm thinking about how we get this amazing information out into the world beyond just publishing it. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And in previous, before COVID, we would distribute it through our networks, and the advisory committee members were very helpful with that. In the COVID years, things have kind of fallen astray because, just nobody's in their offices. But I think this report is a really important piece of collateral, and we do produce a one-pager generally off cycle with this shortly after the fiscal year ends to do a very quick snapshot of the year that we produced for the advisory committee. All of that goes on our website, and we put it on social. I think in terms of reaching the broader audience with the message of like lots has been done and thank you for supporting Measure AA, that's a multi-pronged thing. So like the open road episode that Supervisor Joya mentioned, and some of our media relations and just ongoing communications efforts, sponsorship of SFBRA magazine. We did a paid insert of Bay Nature a couple years ago. That's sort of how we are consistently saying thank you, and we're getting it out. And things like project signage, I think, are hugely important. So when you're driving past, you see our little logo. So yes, there is I see that very much part of my job as an ongoing drumbeat of stuff is happening. Thank you, voters. This money is getting to work for projects that mean a lot to you. There's not a plan for a mailer, just we don't have budget for doing like a full-scale mail out to the Bay. But I think we consistently see that as an important thing. And I'm hoping that next year, as we do this kind of big 5 years in campaign with a digital report, with more digital assets, that will be even more accessible to more people.
Yeah, I definitely think the halfway mark is something where we should maybe have a broader plan and put a little more money into it, because it is not on people's minds. And I am assuming that we're going to want to go back and continue the funding for all these incredible, important programs. And it's good news. And there's so little of it. that I think it's important for us to stay in front, not just of the people who drive by, et cetera, but the people who are making this investment. I mean, they're investing $12 a year and, mailing to each one of them. And if it's going to be, I don't know how much, it's a lot of money, but it's probably 40 cents, 30 cents per address. It just seems like something we might want to think about doing in a future budget.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think, the 5 years has flown by. It's amazing how quickly this happened. So thinking about the 20 years and laying out a plan for the next 15 years in terms of communication to the voters, and if the board were to decide to go for a renewal, then thinking about that well in advance. So it seems like a long way off, 15 years, but we've seen how quickly time flies. So yeah, these are all great ideas. And I think mailers, thinking about the cost of mailers in advance and budgeting for that out of the administrative part of the budget. And I love the idea about the social media posting. So taking the annual report and just creating some easy social media postings that each of you could, share with your followers. So yeah, thanks for all these.
My apologies, I said halfway through, it's a quarter.
All right.
It'll be halfway very soon.
Berkeley does everything in 10 years, so I'm like, we're halfway there. Still, it feels a little less urgent when it's a quarter, but still important, I think, to stay on people's radar. Thank you.
Dr. Joy, did you have a second comment?
Yeah, just to say, I agree. We should try to have more, do more outreach on this, even if it's some shorter, printing costs, I understand, some shorter version. I think it's important to do some direct communication. Obviously, you'll send us the link to this beautifully done report when it's done, so we could actually do our own communication on it. When do you expect that to be finalized?
March, end of March, beginning of April.
Okay. Thanks.
The one pager is already on the website. We can send you that link if you wanted the one pager.
Okay, that's good.
I just ask a quick follow-up question. It's not something we would go into in a meeting like this, but is the campaign committee still open for the original campaign? Or was all that closed when the actual campaign for this was over? I'm just curious if that committee is still open, and if it is, outside of a meeting like this, I'd be interested in knowing more about that.
I'd be surprised if it's still open, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we need a motion to approve the report.
So moved from Susan Gorin.
Seconded from Lieber.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead with the roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn,
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber,
Yes.
Supervisor Gorin,
Yes.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 9 is approved.
We move to item 10, which is an information item. We do this each year to have our consultant from NBS talk about the annual levy report. So we will turn it over to our consultant, I believe, Mr. Seufert.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Tim Seufert here, and keeping with the theme, I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet unless there are questions. I'm going to see if we can share the screen here. Everybody seeing that big slide with 3 photos?
Yep.
Yes, great. All right, so Tim Seufert with NBS. I'm going to give a brief overview of the parcel tax and some of the questions, concerns, what have you. Not to belabor it, but I was just thinking about the discussion a little bit ago. So we do have the database with all 2 million property owners with their mailing addresses to where their property tax bill goes. So could do a bulk rate postcard kind of thing. We have the data, we could certainly help out there. So topic for another day. The agenda though for this morning, I'm just going to really briefly talk about the parcel tax. I think everybody's pretty familiar with it. The information that's available to the public, should somebody new or somebody forget of what it is, what the levy summary was, a reminder of who we are, and then get into any questions. I think everybody's familiar with the measure, of course, but just to remind, it's $12 tax that was passed per parcel. There is a toll-free phone number listed on the property tax bill for all 9 counties. So if anybody is interested, they're looking at their property tax bill, they call that number. There is no website address on a property tax bill yet. And they get a recording and they get a referral to this myparceltax.com, which has this description and some nice pictures of what the parcel tax does. If somebody really has questions, they're trying to figure out, can they pay it off? There's some escrow issue. They can call our office 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and get a live answer. Don't get a lot of those calls, but once in a while we do. This is probably the most interesting slide to pay attention to. It's the amount of money, of course, that we put on the tax roll this past year, 25.8 million. It was up about $40,000 over the last year tax roll. So that's, about 3,000 or so net new parcel numbers within the county, the 9 Bay Area counties. There was a lot of discussion, a couple of years ago when we head into the pandemic, are people going to just completely stop paying their taxes? Are we going to have real cash flow issues? That has largely not been an issue whatsoever. In fact, in my 20 plus years of working in this world, property tax delinquencies seem to be at the lowest ever. Most are in the 1% to 2% range around the Bay Area. So that is good news. 6 of the 9 counties, it doesn't even matter what the delinquency rate is because the collections are on this teeter plan where the counties forward the money directly regardless of delinquencies. So long story short, cash flow is good in that respect. NBS, this is the kind of thing we do. We do parcel taxes, assessment districts, property related fees, that kind of thing. I'm here in San Francisco, in the flood building, and our main office is down in Southern California. So with that, staying brief, does anybody have questions? Yes, Supervisor Peskin, I saw you on the street the other day. You're on mute.
I thought that was you. It's my same annual question, which is relative to the fees that we pay the various counties and whether we have right size and equalize that or where that's at.
I don't believe there's been any change. So that's, quick history lesson. That's the fees have been like that for 100 years with local government control, if you will. They're supposed to justify every fee by a cost allocation plan and a fee study. I know Scott Wiener was looking at some of that and looking at a bill. I am not aware. Karen and I spoke about this a couple of days ago that actually went anywhere. You did see on one of the slides earlier, not my presentation, but earlier that the total
739. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a significant cost, obviously. Each county really has their own sort of system. Some are on a percentage with a cap and some are just a flat fee, what have you. I think Supervisor Joya did speak with their tax collector folks and maybe there was some reduction given like 2 years ago, but my memory is thin on that at the moment.
And my recollection was that this was not subject to Prop 218, that they can actually make money on this. It's not just cost recovery.
I don't think it's subject to Prop 218 because it doesn't fit in those categories. It is a fee, and so they have to just justify it and just ensure that they're not, truly making money. They can allocate costs in a number of different ways. Prop 26 and 218 would govern. We have a group that actually specializes in fee studies and such. I could poke at that with them and get back to you if that's of interest.
Well, I mean, if we're going to make a state case out of this, I guess the question is how egregious or disproportionate are some counties relative to others per parcel?
Right. It's a somewhat of a tight band, but then some counties are a little more than others. I'm also remembering, it seems like San Francisco gave a little bit of a discount as well, right?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I went and banged on somebody's door.
I think that's right. Yes.
All right.
We could poke at that and, come back with some kind of report or something, maybe at the next board meeting if.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that with you offline.
Okay, sure.
Any further comments?
Anything else? All right, I will stop the share. And I will go back to mute here unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the update and the good report.
Yes, have a good weekend, everybody.
Item 11 concerns the advisory committee voting procedure, which was touched on at the last meeting. And this is a follow-up to that. Jessica?
Yes, good morning, Chair Pine and board members. I am following up from last meeting's discussion at which our advisory committee chair checked in with the board. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. About their voting procedure, which in the past, they just recorded how the vote went. Did they achieve consensus or did they vote? If they couldn't achieve consensus, did they vote majority yes or no? And then any minority opinion. And after our legal counsel did some research and advised us, we have prepared this resolution for you that clarifies this issue in the advisory committee procedural document. And so there's a red line version attached to the resolution that is pretty straightforward. It just says, yes, we do need to record how each member voted. So that's what's required, and that's what they'll be doing from now on. And we've advised the chair and vice chair about this, and we have an upcoming advisory committee meeting where they're going to be revisiting their charter, which while the board approves this AC procedural document, the AC itself has their own charter that they need to vote on, and they're supposed to revisit it every couple of years. So that's how this came up. And yeah, so if there are no questions, recommend that you approve this resolution.
Mr. Doyle.
Yeah, I remember this came up. I was actually last time, I think I was unaware and maybe surprised that individual votes weren't recorded, given the significance of those recommendations, and which raised the issue. Maybe I missed something about the Brown Act, because Brown Act committees require that committees, the individual members have their votes recorded. So I looked through, am I missing something? Shouldn't this be a Brown Act committee?
It is, yes. And we just weren't aware, I guess.
Okay, so they were technically violating the Brown Act every time they made recommendations by not recording votes. So yeah, I don't know how that got by us. So I'm glad this is being corrected. right away. Because notices for their meetings are all published and set up pursuant to the Brown Act, correct?
Yes.
And presumably, our policy about Zoom meetings then applies to that, about continuing the emergency on Zoom applies to them. And so just maybe on a related issue, when we eventually go back to in-person meetings, depending what happens under the requirements of state law, we would still have this group, similar to us, continue to have a hybrid format that allows the public to participate virtually. I just wanted to say that since it's related to this advisory committee. Assume, has that been the plan?
Yeah, and in fact, the advisory committee has requested that they be able to meet remotely at publicly accessible locations
Right.
in all 4 regions. And
Yeah.
so it's going to be a technological lift to get everybody connected and being able to see
Well,
and hear each other.
yeah. Let me
But
say, yeah, I
that's-
think, right.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, that's the plan, is to figure that all out by May. But for March, we'll still be remote.
So let me say what I said at the BCDC meeting. We've got a number of regional agencies, right? ABAG, MTC, the Air District, BCDC, the authority. Rather than each agency setting up its own publicly accessible sub-regional location, we raised the issue that the agency should all work together and have a West Bay, East Bay, North Bay, South Bay kind of location. And of course, governing board members who have offices, like I'm going to have my office be set up for publicly accessible hybrid meetings. So if I want to participate, depending again, if the law doesn't change in the Restoration Authority, I can do it from my office where the public can also come, or other members. But there will be gaps in that. So I think I would suggest that you reach out to BCDC and the other other executive directors who are going to have this discussion, so that if there needs to be, like many years ago before the pandemic, the Air District had a location up at Santa Rosa Junior College that it's set up technologically for the North Bay folks. Without knowing where they're going to be, I'm just strongly suggest that we don't do this alone, that we should be doing it with the other regional agencies that are going to have sub-regional locations.
That sounds like a wonderful idea, because I was not looking forward to negotiating with 4 different volunteers that wanted to host at their agencies or organizational offices, and making sure they all have the right technology.
Call Larry Goldsman and because he's, and the Air District, Jack Broadbent, they're all doing the same, and it makes no sense to recreate the wheel for each of the regional agencies. So they're going to work on this together.
I'll just add in, SFEP is part of MTC as staff. So we're in that building at 375 with BCDC and the meeting management there. So I can work in with them.
Good.
To,
Yeah, I think they were going to try to figure out, where to do these and to have, in this post-pandemic world, right? Again, it depends what the law is going to be. There've been some bills to possibly change it, but the way the law exists now, once the emergency is over, governing board members have to be at as you say, a public ADA accessible public location, posting the location, however many 10 days in advance, and allow the public to come in and participate. So I think this will be a good opportunity to figure out, how the regional agencies do all this.
Thank you. Wonderful suggestion.
Director Holman?
Yeah, I think it is a really great suggestion. I have one question. I don't need an answer to it right now, but in order to help facilitate finding those evenly distributed locations, is someone going to be preparing a map that shows, like, here's the South Bay and what we're considering the South Bay, and here's, like a central location within the South Bay to kind of help determine or identify locations that might be equally accessible by folks. So just a thought. I don't
Yeah,
think.
no, that's good. I know when we talked about this at BCDC at some length, that the executive directors were going to figure all this out. And so maybe, the staff here heard your, hopefully can relay that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, there may be more than one location, right, in each sub-region, like in the West Bay, right? One in San Francisco, one in Redwood City. I think that the more, the better potentially for the public as well. The other thing, what we talked about at BCDC was, individual members, those of us, let's say, that are in county government who have an office, may make our offices available as well. And those can also be in addition to any that the agency set up and have them be available. Sophie can come up, take Bart from Berkeley and come to my office if she wants, and or I'll go there. I don't know if she has something in Berkeley where it's available even for other members of the agency.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Just say I'd be delighted to see you.
the test for our regional bodies to see if they can coordinate all this. Otherwise, we're all going to John Joy's office.
Well, you're welcome to come here from where you're at, but I'm sure there'll be a closer one to you there. Maybe your office, Dave, your office.
Sure.
You could turn your office into one for the West Bay.
Sure thing.
If Aaron promises to do it at the Trieste, maybe we'll come over there.
We have a Trieste in Berkeley too. It could be Trieste East-West.
Yeah, they changed it now, Sophie, it's the Chiavo now.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, there was Aaron can tell you about the family dispute.
Keep that for another time. I don't think that was agendized.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is an action item. We'll just check to see if there's any public comment.
No public comment.
And we could entertain a motion on the item.
So moved.
I'll second that. We have the roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Piskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin.
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Yes,
This motion passes. Agenda item number 11 is approved.
thank you. So we'll now move to a grant proposal, item 12, for the youth engagement in service learning in East Oakland. So we've got the staff that has a report on that.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Pine, Restoration Authority board members and members of the public. My name is Virgilio Quasi, and today I'm recommending that the authority disperse up to $99,173 through the Community Grants Program to Planting Justice to develop a curriculum for training youth interns through a series of 10 workshops, conduct the workshops to train approximately 20 youth interns in environmental justice issues and San Francisco Bay habitat restoration techniques, and lead youth interns in shoreline cleanup, invasive plant removal, and habitat restoration work at Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline, Alameda County. Next slide, please. So the Sobrante Park neighborhood of East Oakland, where Planting Justice Nursery resides, is bordered by San Leandro Creek to the south, Highway 880 to the southwest, and freight railroad tracks to the northwest. The neighborhood's location next to these pieces of infrastructure separates it from adjacent communities and exposes its residents to health hazards. Historic and persistent structural inequalities have contributed to this community's social and economic disadvantages. All curriculum-based activities and workshops will be held at this nursery location. Next slide, please. Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline is a 748-acre park leased by the East Bay Regional Park District from the Port of Oakland and located near International Airport. This vast park is a remnant of what was once extensive marshland at San Leandro Bay. Restoration activities will occur on the shoreline next to the Garretson Point staging area at Save the Bay's nursery within the park. And you can see that with a red arrow pointing to a yellow shaded area. This site features well-established native plant species such as wild rye, western goldenrod, along with occurrences of invasive plants such as a yellow star thistle and annual native grass. Next slide, please. The grantee, Planting Justice, is a community-based organization that serves the Sobrante Park community, as well as East Oakland at large. Founded in 2009, their mission is to empower people impacted by mass incarceration and other social inequities with the skills and resources to cultivate food sovereignty, economic justice, and community healing. Planting Justice operates 5 highly integrated programs that involve a range of disciplines from urban farming to peer mentoring and are staffed by 38 full-time workers, most of whom are Sobrante Park residents. Next slide, please. Planting Justice will partner with the Sagorete Land Trust, an urban Indigenous women-led land trust that facilitates the return of Indigenous land to Indigenous people, to develop curriculum centered on topics including bay habitat restoration, native shoreline plant identification, plant propagation and revegetation, water conservation, local environmental justice issues, permaculture, land rematriation and its connection to bay shoreline restoration, and Bay Area Native American history. This curriculum will be delivered through a paid internship consisting of a 10-session series of workshops that engages up to 20 local youth between the ages of 13 and 24 from the surrounding community. Participants will learn how to identify, propagate, plant, maintain, and use native plants through hands-on activities that they will use in practice at the site selected for restoration work. A potential workshop with the invasive Spartina project is in the works. Next slide. Upon completion of the workshop series, the project will conclude with a capstone internship that will be delivered in partnership with Save the Bay. Youth interns will carry out enhancement and restoration activities and one final educational activity over the course of 2 separate days at Save the Bay's Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline Nursery. Program participants will clean up the shoreline and remove invasive plant species on one day, then transplant native plants propagated in the nursery and explore the transition from tidal wetland to uplands as an educational activity on a separate day. Next slide. The interns will transplant native plants such as creeping wild rye, western goldenrod, California rose, and yarrow to select locations on the site that will establish the support that will support the goal of ensuring non-native invasive plants do not establish. Targeted invasive species in this area include yellow star thistle, fennel, and invasive annual grass species. The interns will remove these invasive species using methods that minimize soil disturbance, including hand pulling and use of hand tools. As part of the internship, participants will receive a stipend of $500 upon successful completion of the program. Next slide. Approving this project will provide positive and long-term impacts to the local community in San Francisco Bay Area at large by training and educating up to 20 Oakland youth in topics such as environmental justice issues, invasive species identification, plant propagation, and shoreline habitat restoration. By engaging in these activities, project participants are expected to have a greater sense of ownership in their local shoreline habitats, encourage long-term stewardship, and prepare them for potential jobs at the Planting Justice Nursery and the broader environmental field, contributing to the economic vitality of East Oakland communities. Next slide. Here today is Gavin Rader's co-director of Planting Justice. We are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. Really a nice job and really exciting program.
Thank you.
Are there board comments or questions? Mr. Joya?
Yeah, first, I'm glad, we established this grant program. I know one of the things we were wanting to do to really achieve more equity. And I want to just acknowledge, I think, one, this is a great project. Two, Planting Justice is a great organization with capacity. And Gavin, good to see you. I know they do work up in the Richmond, El Sobrante area as well. So I just wanted to say it's great to see projects like this beginning to happen. Working with great community-based organizations in partnership with others, and look forward to supporting it. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Check to see if there's any public comment. I don't know if you want to say anything, Gavin.
I think you have to elevate him to panel, don't you?
Yeah, he has to be elevated.
He's in the panelist list now.
Okay. I was wondering why I didn't see the normal Zoom here. Can you all hear me now?
Hey, Gavin. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Gavin Raiders. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Virgilio, for summarizing all of that. The only correction I'll make, and this is probably my fault, we actually have 60 full-time staff. And it's important because half of our staff are formerly incarcerated people. Many others who are not formerly incarcerated have also been impacted by mass incarceration in their families, including many of the young people that we work with. And we're super invested in SFBRA Park as a neighborhood. We work on 5 acres just on one block on 105th Avenue. And our nursery is open to the general public, so I would love to see any of you all come. And 24 of our staff members live within just 1 mile of our nursery in SFBRA Park. So they are raising their children there. They've grown up in that community, and it's very easy for us to be able to invite SFBRA Park youth due to the real neighborhood community ownership that's happening at the nursery, where people are, inviting their own families and community members and the people that they know just on the street to be able to be a part of this opportunity, which does lead to living wage jobs for people upon completion. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comments and joining us today.
Hey, can I say something, Gavin, about your project up in Richmond, El Sobrante? Since it's sort of, they actually Planting Justice, which has a site up in El Sobrante, actually just recently, along with another partner, purchased a very long-standing, well-respected, former Japanese family-owned nursery that had a lot of historic significance in the Richmond area, the Adachi family, and is actually going to be turning that into a similar site as a nursery, and continuing the tradition of these many Japanese family nurseries that were in the Richmond area. And again, working with at-risk individuals and really providing an opportunity. So excited to see that happen.
Thanks, John. We will be open up this year. It's been a long road.
Great.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing you there too.
Okay, I think we have a motion and a second to approve this grant. Unless there's any further comment, we can take the vote, please.
Sorry, who was the second? I missed that.
I think Peskin was, right?
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I'm going to call the roll. Supervisor Joya?
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Director Holman?
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn?
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber?
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin?
Muted. Aye.
Thank you. Chair Pine?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 12 is approved.
Thank you all so much. Wonderful news.
Thanks, everyone.
So let's move now to item 13, which is a review of our grant 5 round, round 5 of our granting cycle. Jessica?
Yes, thank you. Hello again, everyone. I would like to present this overview of staff's anticipated recommendations on projects to be considered for funding in Grant Round 5 and a summary of the project selection process. I'll provide an update on the expected distribution of funding by region and project phase if the listed projects are authorized. And finally, I'll present a recommendation to skip the 2022 request for proposals or RFP. As a reminder, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority Act requires the authority to fund projects that protect, restore, or enhance habitats along the shoreline of San Francisco Bay, as well as funding public access and flood management elements of those habitat projects. Measure AA provides specific criteria to consider when selecting projects to fund, as described in the Round 5 RFP. So there are scoring criteria, and those include addressing the programs and activities of Measure AA for 20 points, addressing Measure AA priorities for 40 points, and demonstrating the likelihood of success for 40 points. And then there are also qualitative evaluations where the reviewers list the top 3 strengths and top 3 weaknesses of each project to aid in the discussion. And there are also follow-up questions that we then provide to the applicants based on the reviewers' input. So the Measure AA prioritization criteria are shown here. As you can see, there's a variety of issues to consider. And just to go a little bit into what do we mean by project's likelihood of success. So it's divided into 2 subgroups: the applicant's capacity and resources to complete and maintain the project, and also the project's level of community involvement and benefits and or innovative partnerships. And one of the things you may notice is that we did have 2 big asks for acquisition. So in that case, we're looking for some kind of willing seller letter or purchase agreement or something to show that, in a sense, their partner, the seller, is ready. And in this case, those acquisition projects didn't have that yet. But anyway, just another aspect of likelihood of success. So drum roll, please. We have the 6 projects that we're looking forward to bringing staff recommendations on. And in this round, the authority will have the opportunity to fund implementation of projects that you all have funded in the planning stage, such as the Tiscornia Marsh Restoration Project and the San Leandro Treatment Wetland. We also anticipate recommending funding for new projects like D-Pave Park in the city of Alameda and Safer Bay down by the Dumbarton Bridge. Wait, am I saying the wrong bridge? Well, I think you all know where it is. And there's also an opportunity to provide additional funds for the planning of Burlingame Shoreline Park. And then the 6th project will focus on developing a programmatic approach to living shorelines, which I think we've discussed in the past. And that will help the authority make progress toward the Measure AA campaign goals related to restoring habitat for shellfish beds and submerged aquatic vegetation. And actually, I believe we're going to have a presentation talking more about living shorelines and those important habitat types in one of the next 2 board meetings. So stay tuned for more on that. But in any case, as you can see, we'll have 1 project in the North Bay, 2 in the East Bay, 2 in the West, none in the South, and 1 covering multiple regions. With respect to the geographic distribution of funds, staff was aware of the need to ensure adequate funding for the East Bay and West Bay regions. And for the second year in a row, the East Bay will receive almost half of the available funding. About 30% will go to the North Bay and 20% to the West Bay. So as you may recall, Measure AA sets geographic targets for half of the funds available, and the targets must be met by the end of the 20-year period of the parcel tax. So as you can see, all the regions are still on track to meet their targets. So after 5 out of 20 years, we'd expect them to be at least at 25% of their target, and they're all at over 25%. We expect to continue to stay on track to meet these targets given the many planning projects in the pipeline, as well as the prospective projects identified in the spreadsheet we presented to you last June. For example, the authority has funded planning for restoration of Hayward Marsh and Long Beach in the East Bay, and Colma Creek and Burlingame Shoreline Park in the West Bay. We expect these projects and many others to request implementation funds in the future. So given the large number of high-scoring projects in round 5, and the fact that the authority's available funds are expected to be approximately 11.5 million in the next fiscal year, staff recommends that the authority forego issuing an RFP this summer, and instead the staff would ask applicants from this grant round 5 that are still in need of funds to submit any relevant project updates by early October of this year. And then we would recommend issuing the next RFP in mid-2023, at which time the 5-year commitment to the South Bay Shoreline project will have been fulfilled, and the authority will again have approximately 21.5 million available for FY 23-24. We think the timing is good for this approach, considering that other San Francisco Bay restoration funders, such as the Coastal Conservancy and EPA, will have larger than average amounts of funding available in the coming year. So if there was a group that didn't apply, they're not going to be at a loss for any other places to apply for funds, even if we don't open up again for the Restoration Authority. So thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Let's go to some questions. Mr. Joya.
So what you're recommending is that we skip a year of the full funding, but for next year. But I want to understand here that the memo says that we would have about 10 million available. If we did go out this year, we would have 10 million available, correct?
Yes.
I mean, so there's a basic question here of whether, I mean, if we don't use the 10, are you saying to roll that over into the following year so that the following year would be more than the normal annual allocation?
No, sorry if I wasn't clear about that. So the idea is that we have roughly 10 million available in this fiscal year. And then next year we'll have a little more, like roughly 11 million available. And we would allocate the full amount each year as we always do. But the difference would be that people wouldn't have to fill out another application. And given that we already have a lot of really great competitive projects, we wouldn't have to invite more people to apply.
So maybe I'm slow this morning. So you would take the round 5, the other highly rated projects in round 5, and evaluate those pool of projects I'm sorry, let me make clear here. So the upcoming round, the new round, which would be what, round 6?
Yeah.
So the round 6 projects you'd only be reviewing the round 5 applicants that were highly ranked for round 6.
Yeah. And some of them, since we had very high asks this year, we're actually only recommending full funding for a couple of the projects. So even the ones that we're recommending funding for, they will want more funding next year too.
Right, but then how much is going to be available in round 6?
About 11 million.
So we'll, all right. So that's what it'll be about 11 million. I see. Okay, I'm looking at it now. So it'll be about 11 million. And it's because of that 2019 allocation to the South San Francisco Bay Shoreline Project, right? Which was the 11.4 million allocation for 5 years. That's why. Correct?
Yeah.
So we'll have 11 million available in the upcoming, and it will the only eligible projects are going to be the ones that applied in round 5. And are they going to be rescored? What's the process going to be?
Well, we don't have all the details worked out because we wanted to see if this was something that the board wanted to do. But the way I envision it happening is that they will be asked to submit updates. So that might affect, how competitive they are.
Got it.
So
Okay.
we would definitely at least consider qualitative factors in ranking them for the next time around. I don't know if we'll go through actually rescoring them. But since they're all, a lot of them are within a standard deviation of each other as far as the scoring anyway. So it's more kind of judgment call of which ones are the most ready, the most impactful. We generally have this very diverse set of projects, and we try to balance, large and small planning and implementation and so forth. So all those factors would go into the decisions about what we would recommend next year.
Okay, so and when will you be coming back to us with the recommendations?
Well, we're probably going to use the same general schedule. Like we would ask for the updates due early October, just like we normally ask for applications by early October. And then since we've already seen them, we might be able to do the review a bit faster. If we had the same schedule, we could come to you in February of next year, or, if you wanted us to, I suppose we could do it earlier, like by December of next year.
Right. You could come earlier just because you have a head start on the evaluation and have more information, right? That's up to it. Bottom line, it sounds like, we would make the allocation decisions by next February, but possibly sooner just because there's a head start on this.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have a long lead time when we prepare board materials. So it's not like we have up until December to make the decision. We'd have to make the December decision in November and so forth. But yeah, it's feasible if you wanted to provide us with that direction.
Okay. All right. Just as one member, and I hear you. I think if you think that they're all really good competitive projects, rather than open up to a bunch of new ones and want to focus on these, I'm fine with that.
And just to clarify, I think you made this point, of the 6 that you're recommending, 4 of them are partially funded. And those 4 would be able to compete for more funding?
Yes.
Okay. Director Holman?
Yes, I appreciate the questions already asked. I want to understand a little bit better. So the South San Francisco Bay Shoreline Project funding for 5 years, it was approved in 2019. If I cut out or something, let me know. My internet seems to be unstable. When does that funding end?
So there's the Fourth Amendment is underway right now. And then there'll be one more in FY 22-23. And then we'll be done.
Okay, so it ends, I wasn't quite sure when it commenced, if it commenced in 19 or, yeah. So, okay, so next year will be the next fiscal year will be the last year that will be funded.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the same thing with the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program, 1.5 million for the current fiscal year and next year. So then that will be done. So that money will be freed up.
Actually, Karen, maybe you want to explain that because you set it up in a different way.
Yeah, the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program, so a year and a half of the budget is coming out of the current budget and will carry them through the next fiscal year.
Right.
And then the last year and a half budget will come out of not next year's fiscal budget, but the one after that, when we have the 25 million available. It'll come out of that, or not 25 million for projects, but the majority of the 25 million would go to projects that year. Does that make sense, or?
I think so. And so to the projects, I have a question, but for about one of them. But then my biggest question has to do with the 2 acquisition requests. And I understand what was said about there wasn't a letter provided indicating that there was a willing seller. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, they're still working on that.
Okay. So the reason I'm really interested in, if not concerned about, especially the Newark Bayland, is because what happens there is going to be a forever decision. And that makes me, the other acquisition is also a forever decision potentially, but it's 58 acres as opposed to 430 acres. It's not clear what's going to happen to that property if it isn't purchased. I understand that the Newark Baylands at the Maori Slough it's a $15 million ask. If there's not a letter stating there's a willing seller, what was the basis for the Trust for Public Lands application? They surely know that. So why did they bring it forward? What was their basis?
I think they were hoping to have the letter by January. So I believe that's what they stated in their application. And I haven't heard yet whether they have it, but they definitely have been in conversation with the landowner. So it had a basis, they believe that they will be able to make this purchase.
Okay.
But there's just a lot of steps,
Right, sure, of course there is. There are. If we don't participate, what are the alternatives for coming up with the $15 million? And I did read that that's, a higher price than what seems to be quote unquote rational. But what are the alternatives for purchasing that property if we don't participate? Did they lay those out?
Yeah, they're looking at a lot of different funding sources, obviously, because their total is 80 million and they're hoping for a bargain sale of 65 million. They've approached the Coastal Conservancy. I think they're probably approaching several other funders, probably state, federal, private foundations. Amy, did you want to say anything about this one?
Yeah, Amy, before you come, I'm interested in knowing, like, if there have been any assurances or indications of support from any of those, because of course, for that kind of a price tag thing, you'd be going to multiple sources. So if that helps in your answer, Amy.
Yeah, and I don't have the answers in terms of TPL's total plan for the 65 million, or how much is secured at this point, how much is likely. I mean, if we do go this path of foregoing an RFP, then they could update us on the project, and we could consider it again for round 6 in terms of Restoration Authority funding. But I don't think staff wants to recommend setting funding aside for this acquisition until TPL is a little farther down the road in terms of of a willing seller letter from the landowner and securing, the other funds necessary for the acquisition.
I appreciate that perspective, and coming from a planning background, I want to put forth one other concern, is that if there is if the report had come back and said, that this is an opportunity to buy this land, that's one thing. But the report also, or the chart also indicates that if not protected, the property will be developed into 469 luxury homes, filling historic tidal wetlands, impacting spatial status and endangered species, and losing a natural transition zone that enables tidal marsh mitigation inland as sea levels rise. So my continued concern is somebody else is approaching this landowner, or this landowner is approaching someone else, and things can happen quickly. So I don't usually speak this much on something, but I feel really passionate about this because it is a forever decision what happens on these lands, and being able to move quickly and being able to give some assurance, some indication of interest and support, I think is really important. So I have a friend that's in her 90s that lives here in Palo Alto, and some of you would know her. And this woman who has, won the Sierra Club Award and has, a preserve named after her and stuff, in her 90s. I spoke with her a few months ago, and she was saying, I was thinking, I just called her up out of the blue, and we keep in touch. And pardon, I ask your endurance just for a moment here for this story. And I called her up out of the blue, and I said, so how you doing? And she said, I was just sitting here thinking, there are all these lands around the bay that aren't protected, and they should be. She's in her 90s and still thinking about that. And if that isn't inspiration and dedication, and when I read this, I immediately thought of her and thinking she's spent decades and decades and decades working towards this. And I will hush at the moment, but I hope I've been able to convey how I view at least the importance of consideration of this. I think it's crucial, if not critical. So thank you all.
Yeah, Director Holman, we definitely hear what you're saying, and I think I know who you are referring to in Palo Alto.
Oh, it's Enid Pearson.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a dear. I'm sure Dave knows her. Probably Sally knows her. Yeah.
So we will stay in touch with TPL about this acquisition, and the Coastal Conservancy is also a potential funder for the acquisition. And I would also say the developer has to go through several regulatory agencies before they can develop the land. So there's some urgency, but there's also, I think, steps that are going to take a while.
I just must add, though, that once an application is submitted and all the steps that have to be gone through, the ball is rolling, and it is very difficult, short of, eminent domain, which would surely result in a lawsuit. The ball is rolling. It's too late. It's too late. So I don't know if Newark is considering putting a protective covenant on. Well, they can't put a covenant on without the owner's permission, but putting a zoning restriction if one doesn't exist now. But it sounds like not if it's being considered for housing in the Bay. So with all due respect, once an applicant gets that ball rolling, it's really too late. So that's why I'm interested in setting aside some of this money, not waiting a year, not waiting 2 years, and seeing what happens. Well, I think I've pled my case here.
Thank you, Director Holman. Director Hahn?
Yeah, thank you. And I really hear what Director Holman is relating. I just had a couple of thoughts. First, a question. When you're saying that you don't think you'll do a new RFP for next year, was the thought that we would mostly use money for projects that have already been approved in the past and that need more money or have a second phase or third phase, or that within the projects that you were not able to fund this year, there are lots of new projects or that might be able to be funded next year? I'm not quite sure if we're just saying we would mostly spend our money on things we've already approved, or if we would be open to approving brand new proposals that already are on the list, or some mix of that. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, I think we're open.
Open to, but the idea would be that it's only projects that have actually already presented themselves at some point, whether they were ever funded or not, that would be considered.
Yeah, so we have 18 projects, I believe, in this round. And we're only able to fully fund 2 and partially fund 4. So any of the 4 that were partially funded, if they're not able to raise the money between now and October from someone else, they would update us on that they still need the money. The ones that we didn't fund at all, same thing. Maybe they're also applying for other sources of funding and they might have already gotten it by October. So we would want everybody to give us an update on what they still need. And also if their project has evolved in significant ways that would make it more competitive.
So these people who have their foot in the door, they could update their projects, bring in other elements, improve them, and you're giving them feedback on why they didn't score as highly as other projects, for example. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's our practice. Whenever people request feedback, we actually give them a written summary of all the reviewers' comments as well as the questions that were raised.
Okay. I guess I can see reasons for not doing an RFP, but I'll just throw out a couple of things that might cut in the other direction, and they may be real concerns, or you may tell me they're not. One is how that impacts the mix. I feel like we have just made a big push on making sure that the equity element is baked in at a very fundamental level to the projects. And we've just done outreach around that, and that we're just starting to get a little traction. So if we don't open it up to new projects next year, might we be, in a sense, closing the door to projects that have a stronger equity focus? Because, it takes longer for a jurisdiction to go work with a community organization, and that community organization to get their head around working in this field. And you know what I mean? So maybe there are people out there who are already thinking, trying to put together synergies to bring forward exciting projects that have that equity focus. And then for us to say like, oh, sorry, actually everyone who was already in the door is more important to us, and you can come back next year. I'm just a little concerned that we might be closing the door to certain types of projects. And then to the bigger question of mix as well. I was, going back and looking in the report. Sorry, I just had it up. Let me see which page it was. On page, where was that? Oh, shoot. Thought I had it right up. Of your written report on page 7, you have the cumulative authorized and recommended funding by region. And, South Bay is still super overfunded. West and North Bay have about, a little less than East Bay, but East Bay has a much bigger amount of funding a lower percentage of the funding that is supposed to go to East Bay has been spent. So again, if we don't have a lot of projects from the East Bay, how is that going to affect our ability to forward these other kind of equity lenses? So it's not, I'm not saying that I know these things are problems. I'm just bringing them up as potential concerns. And then, to sort of some of the themes that other folks have raised here, what if there is a unique opportunity that is time sensitive, that is connected to a new project, a piece of land that, get it or lose it? Are we shutting the door on our ability to seize those kind of opportunities as well? So, it's very mixed. I'll say Berkeley has a project that didn't get funded this year. And so, you could say I have a vested interest in keeping the pool small, but that's not the hat I wear when I'm here. And I really am committed to all the different dimensions of diversity and equitable distribution of funds. And I am concerned about what closing the door on additional proposals might do to that. So that's my thoughts on this.
Yeah, and thanks for all those thoughts, and we can definitely take a closer look in terms of the geographic mix and the equity component in terms of the unfunded or underfunded projects. There's 46 million of unfunded projects in round 5. And we have about 11 million next fiscal year. So I think part of what we're thinking also is not putting people through the work of applying for the next round. I mean, it can be quite a bit of work to put a grant application together when we only have 11 million and we already know there's 46 million in need, and many of those projects scored well, in the 80s.
So that becomes kind of a cash flow issue. And so rather than try to manage the open hands, do we have the ability, for example, to borrow against our future revenues? So could we borrow money now, pledge future income, because we know we're getting $12 a parcel every year, fund a chunk of projects next year and the year after, and then pre-announce with a longer runway that we are front-loading some of our investments for 2 years or 3 years because we've borrowed against our future income. And then the 3 years after that, we're not going to be taking new projects. So, I don't know if, to manage our cash flow, imposing scarcity at a time when we need to fund abundance might not be the right end of the equation for us to be looking at. I think we should be looking at how do we make more funds available now? So I don't know all the constraints of this particular measure, but it seems to me that one can, maybe some of the folks who are have more years under their belt than I do, but I believe you can borrow against with this kind of a tax, right? So why aren't we looking at that? Do more faster. Can someone answer? Is this tax something that we can borrow against?
I can answer a little bit. We did talk about that before. It does bring in some other things. And I will remind folks that our CFO, who's the MTC CFO, retired in, I believe, they did just announce we've hired a new CFO who's starting later in March. So I think that's something when they come on, we can, circle.
It's a legal
together,
question.
with the CFO. I do think there is ways to do it. I'm not an expert. So we can look into that with the new CFO and see, what the implications of doing that are and what the work is behind that. So I think we can look into that a little bit. Amy Roach can talk to the legal side of it, but I do believe there are mechanisms to do that.
Yeah, I'll just add that we do need to look into it and get back to you with an answer on that.
Thank you. So I will just say that I don't remember, is this an action item today?
Or we need to give direction as to whether we're going to proceed with a new round or not.
Okay, I will say that I would feel more comfortable waiting to have an answer to this question before making a decision. Unless my colleagues just aren't, think it's a crazy idea and don't think it's the right way to go. I personally would like to know if we can borrow against it. I would like us to be able to consider that. Thank you.
Make sure we discuss that possibility. Director Gorin?
Hi, and Sophie, you asked a couple of the questions that I wanted to ask, and I voiced some concerns at this point the last couple of years. How do we get to the point of representational true-up? Looking at the graphs on page 7, and I've mentioned before, North Bay and East Bay in particular, but West Bay also, seem to have a gap there. And at some point, we're going to have to grapple with saying, okay, we will no longer accept applications for those areas that are overfunded potentially, although we do have a big chunk of funds for competitive grants. So that's my comment. But the question I have, did the advisory committee agree with this recommendation?
So we don't bring these to the full advisory committee. The way it works is we have advisory committee members who volunteer to be reviewers. And so they participate in the scoring and the qualitative evaluation.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. Now, I'm concerned that the advisory board has not weighed in on this because they have representatives from all around the Bay. And I agree with Sophie's comment that if there are a number of project applicants that may be working on queuing up applications for funding, maybe for the next round or next year, and then suddenly having that curtain pulled and not being able to apply for the funding for a new project or continuation of the project that they've been partially funded for previously, like the Sears Point restoration and other San Pablo North Bay projects moving forward. I know that the Land Trust is busy and active working on some of those acquisitions and projects. So I guess that's my concern. I understand, boy, well, first of all, let me say, wow, we're doing a great job. We are offering funding for some spectacular projects that are really moving us closer to our goals. And I know and knew at the time that it was going to be really difficult because some of the projects are very expensive. And how do we encourage them and fund them knowing that they are under constraints, especially with land acquisition, always a dicey proposition. I don't have the answer like many of you, and maybe this is a stopgap, but I think we need to have a better answer to Commissioner Hahn's question of can we borrow in anticipation of funds? That is a legal and fiduciary question, but then we still have ultimately the same conversation about how we achieve proportional funding for some of the projects around the Bay. And I don't yet have an answer for that, but I'll just say yay. We're all having a great time with great projects, and it's hard. So thanks all for your conversation.
Dr. Lieber?
Thank you, Chair. I am really on the same page with staff about we don't want to just create churn of individual organizations or agencies needing to apply when it might not be merited. But I think that a wider scope than what's immediately recommended here would be good. And I think out of the projects that are listed here, I feel the most passionate about those that prevent harm in terms of not allowing wastewater to go into the bay. And also, I really agree that the Newark Baylands possibility is very compelling, because I do think that's a one-way gate that is open to us now and won't be in the future.
Okay, let me add just a couple of comments. Been a lot of different topics brought up on the proportionality. I think we are going to be okay. We know we're only 5 years in, and we're excess of 25% in all the areas. And I don't foresee future grants happening in any abundance in the South Bay. So I feel pretty good about the proportionality. On the borrowing, I think we ought to find out the answer, the legal answer to that. But I would have some reservations about it, since ultimately, if we pull money in from the future, well, we won't have that money in those future grant opportunities. And then the needs we have, they're great now, but I don't see them diminishing. So I see the demand continuing over time. So I'd be reluctant to borrow against the future. I do think the Newark project is one we need to keep our eye on. It ranked very high, and it really is a kind of a red light, green light situation. So, that may be potentially a funding need that would take up a good chunk of that remaining $10 million. So I guess I do have some reluctance about going out again, given that we only have the $11 million to work with. Particularly if we have this keen interest in this Newark project.
Well, I propose that staff come back at the next board meeting with a memo on borrowing against future revenue, and also an update on the Newark Baylands acquisition. And yeah, we don't need to make a decision now about doing a round 6 RFP. Yeah, I've heard all of your thoughts and concerns, and we can talk more at the next board meeting and make a decision at that point.
Did Director Gorin or Director Holman have additional comment?
No, I'm just going to lower my hand. Thank you.
I do just one. In addition to, I appreciate the conversation and discussion among board members, and glad this is coming back to us. As you're finding out if we can borrow against future funding, and it's not something that I would typically probably relish, but I think there are particular concerns this time around. Is it also possible to ask or could you also ask the question of the possibility of, at least as of now, there's not a letter from the owner of the Newark Baylands, but is it possible to, if you will, form a pledge toward acquisition, if that's something in our mechanism that's built in or could be provided? We don't want to be giving money to the Trust for Public Land if this doesn't happen. So can we condition funding? So that's the other question that I had. And thank you for all the work. I know this is a lot of work, and appreciate all the effort that goes into it. I agree pretty much with my colleagues' comments overall. So thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe Amy Roach can help us from a legal perspective of what is suitable as far as a board action. If the board wanted to commit before something was definitive about whether the acquisition could move forward or not.
Yeah, I think that the board could authorize a grant to TPL for an acquisition of property if that property becomes available for sale. The thing we have to be cautious about in conditional approvals is CEQA, and not authorizing a grant subject to future CEQA compliance, but we can consider the CEQA issues raised by an acquisition and be able to authorize a grant for that acquisition if the seller becomes a willing seller in the future.
Am I wrong in thinking this? I was thinking that an acquisition is not a CEQA event.
Well,
Am I wrong? Am I wrong in that?
Acquisitions for certain purposes, which are going to be the authority's purposes, such as preservation of habitat, open space, are exempt from CEQA. So it just can depend on the situation, but yeah, most likely this would be an exempt acquisition.
Yeah.
Also on this item, we did receive some correspondence about the D-Pave project, where a number of people appealed for full funding. And those written comments were distributed to the board, and they're posted on the website. Is there any, I don't think there's any need to read those, but just want to double check that. Do I have that right, counsel?
Chair Pine, we had indicated on our website that we would read comments that came in the day before. I think the concern was making sure that all board members were able to receive and see comments, and we need to update that language because I think we drafted that in the earlier stages of the pandemic. So I think we don't need to read it if we can confirm everybody has had the opportunity to see those. If not, Taylor could do a brief summary of what's in those comments. Did all board members receive the Annalika's package with the written comments?
I did, of course.
Okay, then I think we can skip the reading.
Okay. It sounds like we're ready to conclude this item and continue the discussion at our next meeting. There's a lot of issues to be brought back.
Mr. Chair, as we're having staff bring back information about the possibility of borrowing, I think that, for me, that raises concerns about the cost of borrowing. And the DNA of this agency has always been around keeping things very simple and keeping that kind of high level of fiduciary faith with the communities, the 9 counties. I think that in that kind of a rubric, I'd be much more comfortable with sort of looking at that for the legacy purchases that come up, rather than taking away the ability of future boards to make choices around projects.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Why don't we, I just want to do a time check. It is just about 1 o'clock. We have 2 more items. Are board members able to stay on? I don't know, staff, how much time you estimate for these next 2 items?
Maybe we take the Bay Adapt first. It's an action item. I may have to leave before the end. So should we do the Bay Adapt next?
You can certainly change that order. But Amy.
I apologize, but I'll have to jump off at 1.
Yeah, I will too. So maybe the Bay Adapt.
Okay, well, Bay Adapt, many of us are very familiar with, of course, because many of us serve on BCDC. I think the plan was to have Dana Breckwald give a brief presentation. Maybe Dana, you can just speak for a few minutes on it if we're going to lose people at one.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I have experience doing this presentation very fast. So let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you for having me. It's really inspiring to see all of the work that's happening here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about Bay Adapt initiative. I believe there's an agenda item to adopt an endorsement for Bay Adapt. So I'm going to tell you what you are endorsing. So I won't go over this. This is something that you all are very, very familiar with. But this is just to show that, you know, many of us are thinking about sea level rise day in, day out. We're also looking at the interconnected systems across the bay that will be impacted if nothing is done. This extends to our transportation systems, future jobs and housing, vulnerable communities, as well as our natural ecosystems. This is why Bay Adapt was developed. Starting in early 2020, we decided that we needed to bring a number of stakeholders together to work towards a shared vision of sea level rise, since all of our systems are so interconnected and everybody will be impacted by sea level rise. The result of this initiative, the result of Bay Adapt, is our joint platform, which I will be telling you briefly what is in that joint platform. Just a refresher, we've been on a 2-year journey here. The joint platform was adopted by BCDC in October of 2021, and a lot has gone into the development of that. And we'll spend a few minutes today speaking about what we're looking at going forward as well. So here's our leadership advisory group. This is a group of about 30 really high level thinkers in the region who helped us shape the joint platform. And we met with them 10 times over the past 2 years. There are some faces here that have been involved in the leadership advisory group. I want to include here our guiding principles. This was the first thing we did with our leadership advisory group, and it was very important to us that we establish what the values were as a group. So these are things like supporting socially vulnerable communities, putting nature first whenever possible, solving more than one problem at the same time. So if we can look at housing and economic issues as well, that's fantastic. We wanted to be really inclusive and transparent and community-led in governance. We certainly didn't want to hold back anybody who's doing great work now, but plan for the long term and recognize that different strategies at different parts of the shoreline may vary. This is just to show you that over the past 2 years, we've worked with hundreds of people around the Bay to understand what we need to include in the joint platform. We met with over 50 groups, had 2 public forums with the general public, held countless working groups, focus groups, and had a public comment period. All of this input led to what we're calling the Bay Adapt joint platform. So what's actually in it? It doesn't specify specific projects for the shoreline, but it aims to leverage the power of collective action to overcome barriers and create systems that enable the region to adapt faster, better, and more equitably. It's organized into 5 categories that align with the typical phases of adaptation efforts: engaging people, gathering and sharing information, creating plans for how to adapt and how to fund it, getting projects constructed, and monitoring progress as a region. Within these categories are 9 actions and 21 tasks that get us to where we want to go. And I'm just going to skip over them right now since you saw this ahead of time. And really, this all adds up to a single Bay strategy. What does this mean for Bay Area communities? It means things like reducing flood risk, protecting our natural areas, equitable support for low-income communities, really making sure that community-focused local plans are getting funded early on, making it easier to permit and construct projects, providing technical assistance, and most importantly, more funding. But BCDC alone is not implementing these tasks. We've been working with other regional, state, and local partners to share how we'll pay for and implement these tasks. Recently, we've been looking at existing momentum where tasks have already begun and what's really urgent. And this has led us to a priority subset of multi-agency initiatives that are really ripe for funding now. And I will mention that with the historic $3.7 billion multi-year climate resilience package, we are working with many stakeholders to propose the Bay Adapt structure as a means of matching the buckets of state funding to our needs that we have here in the region. So we're honored that you're considering adopting a Bay Adapt resolution today. Just to show the good company that you will be joining if you choose to adopt. Over 50 other agencies, cities, counties, and nonprofit and for-profit groups has signed on. And this is really to show that we are all in this together and we all have a role to play in making the region more resilient. It shows that to Sacramento and DC that we're committed to working together. It means you'll have a voice at the table when it comes to implementing tasks, and it helps lend momentum and credibility for the work we're all doing together. So thank you for your time and your consideration today. And I believe you got a mailing with the actual joint platform, but we also have a newly relaunched website that would allow you to go into detail on any of these tasks as well. I think that's record time for that presentation, so I'm sure you have questions.
All right, thank you for working with us on the timing. Are there any questions, quick questions for Dana before we take a vote on the matter? Check for public comment.
No public comment, sir.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If we could take that roll call vote, please.
Yes, Supervisor Joya,
Aye.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 15 is approved.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to lose John. Anyone else have to drop off?
Aye.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and consider our final item then, since we have most of the board, which is information item concerning watershed management approaches to removing sediment from bay wetlands. And Scott Dusserhoff will present on that item.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for having me. And thanks for sticking around. I will try to be speedy in my presentation as not to keep you too much past 1 o'clock, but I do appreciate you having me here this afternoon. So let me start sharing here. Okay, title slide on your screen. Yes? Okay. Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here this afternoon to talk with you all about the Sediment for Survival report. So this report looks at the future of bayland sediment need and how that compares to the future of sediment supply under a changing climate, and then uses those findings to develop a suite of management recommendations focused on supporting long-term bayland resilience. So this is really part 2 of a 2-part presentation. Part 1 was the presentation Letitia Grenier gave you all back in April when she walked through the findings of the report at a high level and focused on the key takeaways. And today, what I'm going to do is focus on the management recommendations from the report, specifically focusing on watershed management approaches for getting more sediment out onto our baylands to help them be resilient under a changing climate. So before getting into it, I want to quickly acknowledge our technical advisory committee, our management advisory committee, and other folks who provided support along the way. This effort would not have been possible without them, and I want to particularly thank the folks on the screen that are with us here this afternoon. So within the Sediment for Survival effort, we focused on answering 3 primary questions. The first question, how much sediment do we think our tidal marshes around the bay, shown here on the left in green, and also our tidal flats or our mud flats, shown here in brown, will need under a changing climate and a rising sea level? So as sea level rises, our marshes and mud flats will need more sediment depositing on them to help them build an elevation to keep pace. So we wanted to know how much sediment is actually going to be needed. We then wanted to know what the natural sediment supply in the future will be to our marshes and our mudflats. And we determined that the need is going to be much greater than the natural supply. So then we asked the question, how can we get more? What are the additional sources of sediment we can call upon to get out to our marshes and our mudflats and help them build in elevation and be resilient under a rising sea level? So this is where we focused our effort. So then what did we find? Well, we found that by the end of the century, under an assumed 6.9 feet of sea level rise, we will need approximately 450 million cubic yards of sediment to support all the marshes and mudflats we have out in the bay today and support all the marsh restoration that we're planning on doing. And so that's an incredible amount of sediment. It's enough to fill a cylinder about this size. You have downtown San Francisco here as reference. So where is all this sediment going to come from? Well, we determined that we can get about 30% of that need from what I call here current landscape and current management approaches. So that's sediment coming onto our marshes and our mudflats with the tide and depositing naturally. And that's also using sediment that's dredged from the bay to fill these deeply subsided areas that we want to turn back into tidal marshes. Okay, so using dredged sediment from navigational channels in marsh restoration projects as we have been doing over the past few decades. So that gets us part of the way there. The good news here is that that remaining 70% that we need, we think exists in the region. We just need to be better about bringing online new management approaches to access more in-bay and watershed sediment and get it out to our marshes and our mudflats where it can deposit and help them build in elevation. And so there's really three sources of sediment that we focus on in this effort. The first is bringing more dredged sediment to restoration projects. So currently, most of the sediment that is dredged from navigational channels is taken out the Golden Gate and dumped, or it's deposited somewhere in the bay and not put on our marshes or our mudflats. And so because of this need, there's a big effort now at play, a big conversation in the region to bring more dredged sediment into play for marsh restoration projects. The next source of sediment that we talk about we should be using better than we currently do is sediment excavated from construction projects around the region, what I call upland excavated sediment. So currently about 2 million cubic yards of sediment per year is taken from construction projects in the region, and most of that is taken to landfill. So we should be finding ways to bring maybe not all that sediment because some of it's contaminated, but more of that sediment down to our baylands so it can help with long-term resilience. And then the third major source of sediment that we discuss in the report is upland reservoir sediment. So by the end of the century, we think there could be over 100 million cubic yards of sediment trapped within all of our local reservoirs. These are just reservoirs in the Bay Area. So again, because of this need in the baylands, we should be finding ways to get that sediment downstream. So this report really focuses on pointing to three types of management actions needed to support long-term bayland health and resilience, or what we call here a three-legged stool approach. And in the near term, we really do focus on that need to bring more dredged sediment into play for restoration projects. But then there are longer term actions here too, and not longer term in the sense that we can wait to act, but longer term in the sense that it will take a while for them to be realized. And the first here is protecting inland migration space. And this comes back to the conversation earlier. Okay, so we know that as sea level rises, marshes will migrate inland if they are able. So we should be protecting that migration space now. So that's where marshes can go in the future. And then the third piece here is a new approach to watershed management. Okay, and so that's where I want to spend just the last few minutes here discussing what this means. So at its simplest, it really means developing an integrated approach to watershed and baylands sediment management, where those managing watersheds are coordinating with those managing baylands to come up with a portfolio of management actions that help get sediment downstream and onto our baylands, but doing it in a way that benefits both watersheds and baylands. Okay, so there are actions that should be at play going from the mountains and the hills in our watersheds all the way down to our baylands. And so one type of actions are those that support improved natural transport of sediment. So having nature be the engine that moves sediment downstream and out to our baylands. That will always be the cheapest option. And so there are a few things to point out here with respect to these types of actions. In the upper watershed, in areas where we have dams, it includes trying to get reservoir sediment routed around our reservoir, or trying to get sediment routed around our reservoirs and move downstream so it can get out to our baylands. And then also bringing online what we're calling here flushing flows. So these are pulses of flows that come out of our reservoirs that mimic the natural flows that would happen before those dams were there. And so just a little bit more information on that. This is part of a larger effort called functional flows. Okay, so what we see here in blue is a graph of flows, what they would look like before a dam went in. We get some small flows in the fall, then we get the big wintertime flows, and then we get flows receding into the dry season. With dams, those peaks are gone, right? Flows are flattened out for the most part. So a functional flows approach, shown here in red, brings back some of those pulses. It doesn't bring all of them back, but it brings back some of them. And that there's ecological benefit to that, but there's also benefit because it helps find sediment, move downstream, and get out to our balance. Okay, so this is not easy. I don't want to make it sound like we can go do this tomorrow. There's a lot of considerations here, especially water supply, right? So if we're releasing more pulses of flow, that's less water in our reservoirs. So that's a water supply impact. But water agencies are open to these ideas, and they understand the benefits. So there is momentum going in this direction within the Bay Area. Okay, so as we move downstream through the watershed, other actions include floodplain expansion, bringing floodplains back to let flows spread out, improving the pathways of sediment getting to our channels. When we get into cities, channel realignment. So a lot of our channels have been rerouted for flood control, and that causes sediment to deposit in areas it didn't match historically. So changing those alignments. And then down here at the watershed Bayland interface, reconnecting our creeks to our baylands to get those sediment-laden wintertime flows out onto the baylands like they did, like that happened historically. And so what does this look like? Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have many channels in the region that have a straightened alignment and also an unnatural alignment, like you see here for flood control purposes. So this means finding ways to get those channels through levees and back out to our baylands where they can deposit that sediment. And this example that I'm showing here, this is Pond A8, Calabasas and Santa Masakino Creeks. This was mentioned earlier. This is a restoration effort that the Restoration Authority is funding. Okay, this is the Calabasas Santa Masakino Creek Marsh Restoration or Marsh Connection Project. And as you all discussed earlier, the Restoration Authority is putting over $3 million towards this effort. Okay, these are actions to improve natural transport. And then there are a suite of actions to increase the supply and reuse of sediment. Okay, so that's getting sediment out of reservoirs and moving it downstream, getting sediment from construction projects and moving it downstream and getting it on to our baylands. And then down at the shoreline, it's getting the sediment that's excavated from flood control channels and getting that put onto our baylands. Okay, so what we see here, flood control channels in the South Bay being excavated to increase capacity to actually allow them to be flood control channels. And currently throughout the entire region, about 150,000 cubic yards of sediment is taken from flood control channels around the Bay shoreline. And most of that sediment is taken to landfill as a waste product. Okay, so because we know our baylands are going to be needing more and more sediment as time goes on, we really should be finding more ways to get this sediment to our baylands. And this is happening. There is a big effort at play in many water agencies to get this sediment on to our baylands, but there's more that we can do. Okay, so that's a quick snapshot of the Sediment for Survival effort and the watershed management actions that we discuss within this report. Here is a URL to the report. And at the bottom here, you see our project partners. This effort was funded by the EPA and the Bay RMP. And if there is time, I am very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for the presentation. Just check to see if the board has any questions or observations. Let's see any hands raised. And do we have any public comment?
We do have one hand raised for a public comment. IT, can you move them in, please?
Moving now.
Thank you. All right, you're in. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Lawrence from San Leandro, and I just wanted to say that that elements of that report have been well known by ecologists for a long time, but cities so often don't follow, they don't have any ecologists on staff with their planning and development department. So here in San Leandro, we're planning to do a lot of the opposite of that. Just recently, a development was approved right on the shoreline that had to be moved back a few feet because it was literally on the shoreline. It still, most of it is. It includes hotels, housing and whatnot for the San Leandro Marina. And so there's leaving no space for the sea level rise to come up and marshes to move up in elevation and whatnot. So I just wanted to point that out. And I wish that, I know it's not the scope of this meeting, but I wish that cities could be brought on board in more of an integrative approach to what we're trying to accomplish here and what the EPA is trying to accomplish. And same thing out in Lathrop, California, in the Delta. I actually was one of the founders of that city, and now I'm sort of horrified as the city continues to channelize the river, just raising the deltas, the levees higher and higher, and developing right up to the edge of the levee and not leaving room for the river to meander at all or deposit sediment or get sediments to where they need to go. I just wanted to say that as an observation. And if you have time or if you can post anything for resources, I would love for you to do that. Thank you. Pass.
Thank you for your comments. All right, again, if there's no further comments or questions, I think we are ready to conclude our meeting. And we'll see everyone on April 22nd. Director Holman had a comment.
Just one really quick request. Is it possible that presentation could be sent to us?
Yes.
The graphical aspect of it is a little more helpful to express to others than all the text.
Yes, I can definitely send. I'll give Jessica the final slides and she can distribute them.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. We'll see you on the 22nd of April.
Or in March.
Bye, everybody.
Special board meeting. Yeah.
On the special board meeting, right?